Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. How are you today, Rob?
Very well, thank you.
To-
And we're talking about Buddhism,
A
our
series.
our favorite topic, or one of the big influences, definitely in our relationship,
Definitely.
our work, and our life.
And so today we're talking about Nirvana, crossing the ocean of Samsara. And we're also going to be telling you how to reach Nirvana today in 3 easy steps.
Or your money back.
And let's do a little review of the last. This is the last series. Next week we're going to start a new series on social neuroscience. So that's going to be interesting. So we talked about the first of this.
Get that. Could you try again?
I think Siri's trying to talk to me. We talked
I
about.
don't know what you mean by I think Siri's trying to talk to me.
Never mind.
What is that?
I think it's your phone.
Is it your phone?
No.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Okay, so I just got a new laptop, so maybe I didn't turn Siri off. That is so funny. So the concept of there's no suffering, like what is suffering and the suffering of the world.
No, it was the concept of no self.
No, well, no. I mean, the first one we talked about
suffering.
was the why we suffer.
Why we suffer. Yeah, so in Buddhism, which is, let's say, it's a really cool philosophy because it's had such a big influence on both East and West. I mean, the East, it's just took over very much like Christianity did in the West and influenced cultures all the way from India to China to Japan. And left its mark and continues to leave its imprint on those cultures. The philosophy, of course, lends itself well to a scientific study because Buddha was very much interested in the everyday, what's verifiable for us right now, not so much in thinking about gods and heavens. That came later, of course, in the development of religion. But he was interested in the mind, very much like a psychologist, a cognitive neuroscientist, but also looking at the deeper dimensions of the mind. What is the essence of our being? And of course, it comes from that tradition of the Vedas. And you cannot really separate his philosophy from that cultural context of the Vedas, meaning he was coming from understanding of consciousness, that it's a conscious universe, it's not a material universe.
Whereas in some Eastern philosophy, some schools of Indian philosophy, they are materialism. It's materialist.
Absolutely.
So
just like in the West.
yeah. So when you hear, oh, it's Eastern philosophy, it's all the same. We have to remember there's so many schools, and so what we're talking about here is a conscious universe, which means that there's oneness. There's no separation. And so we talked about why we suffer. We talked about the no self concept.
Yeah. So in essence, we suffer as human beings because our misperception of the world. We focus on the objects of the world and expect those objects to be permanent, which they are not. They are totally impermanent. If you look at anything, it's ever morphing, ever changing. And therefore, that's one of the key principles is that if you expect impermanent things to give you happiness as permanent objects, you're setting yourself up for failure and for suffering. Then this idea of no self, it was around at that time when Buddha was studying. He was going around to different gurus and practicing with them, and he almost killed himself essentially doing some of those practices.
Yeah, they were really extreme.
Very
ways
extreme.
to work on the body and
yes, to kind of castigate the body, try to get to the spiritual essence of the human mind. But anyway, this idea of no self, meaning no ego, and no permanent kind of entity there, it's still very intriguing because neuroscience kind of backs it up. If we look for the ego in the brain, it's not there. If we look for a permanent, stable self, we can't find it anywhere.
I know when we cling so much to our ego and our persona, and that this, like, I'm trying to think of the word. It's just like what people think about us and what we accomplish in our life is so real and solid, and that we're going to leave a legacy, and it's like us and our name. And it really is just an idea. It's not real.
Absolutely. And so that no self is a key part of Buddhist philosophy that distinguishes it from some other philosophies that kind of focus on the Atman or the individual soul. And then the Matrix, his idea that everything is interrelated.
We talked about that last time, and about the enlightenment in society. There's so much going on in the world and all over, just so many things happening, and there's a lot of people think, well, how can I make that change? And they're trying to make the change out there. And we talked about that we're connected to it all, so we can make the change within ourselves.
Yeah, Indra's net, this vision of the universe intricately connected. In other words, everything, every piece of the universe reflecting everything else. It is also backed up by current or progressive neuroscience and quantum physics. It's showing us that the universe is not the way it appears to us. I mean, we started right by thinking about atoms and molecules. The table is not as solid as we think it is. If we look at its molecular structure, it's vibrating. It's mainly empty space. It appears solid to us because of the structure of the molecules, but it is not what it appears to be. But even deeper than quantum mechanics goes into this idea that it needs an observer. It only exists as a table the way we are perceiving it because we're perceiving it. The observer creates the universe creates the observer, and that interdependence is what the Buddha was talking about. Now, think of this. Him sitting and meditating realized this truth, whereas we require whole teams of scientists and telescopes and observations and mathematicians, to even get close to that idea. But the difference is, of course, from the scientific perspective and the Buddhist perspective, is that science is looking at it from the outside, whereas he was directly perceiving this, directly looking at this reality.
So let's go to Nirvana.
Yeah, so finally we get to
Nirvana.
the key point of
the promise of this work, right?
Yes, because Buddha emphasized this. What I'm teaching you is how to transcend suffering, right? If we're not able to transcend suffering, then what's the point? All this meditation, all this philosophy, it's
just suffer in the world and
just beautiful thoughts or interesting ideas, but they're not really hitting the mark. His emphasis was, how can we as human beings transcend our suffering? This sea of samsara that we are in. And samsara is, again, kind of the buying into the appearance of things and believing that those things are going to make us happy.
It's interesting how Sara sounds like sorrow, right?
Yeah.
And it is that kind of, we have this sorrow in the world because it's changing all the time. We can't hang on to anything.
Yeah.
And it keeps moving. I know Pema Chodron calls it the groundlessness of life, that can be very unsettling for people, because we're always looking, the ego's always looking to latch onto something like a life preserver, like this is going to make me happy finally.
Yeah.
And the samsara is this moving, and that's why we call it the ocean, because as you see the ocean, it's not still, it's constantly moving and shifting with the tides and the waves and weather. And so what is nirvana? Can we talk about what it is? For those of you who don't know what nirvana is, besides the band.
The 1990s band.
Yeah.
Yes, so if we were able to define it, right, we'd be the gurus of the world, basically.
Or define it in a way people can understand it.
Yeah. Plus, let's say the verbal definitions are not it, because just like Lao Tse says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Anytime you define nirvana, that's not it. Basically, you're approximating it, or you're trying to explain it from the outside, but it's not what the Buddha meant. So there's a story where I think they ask him something similar to this, like, tell us what is the end game of it all. And he doesn't say a word, but he lifts up a flower and just holds it. That's pretty much what he's getting at. That it is this presence, this reality, this consciousness, this awareness that is empty of concepts, no self, no object. Now, it's not a nihilistic philosophy. In other words, it's not saying there's just nothing and what's the point?
I know, I thought of that, like life is empty.
Yeah, it's not that. It is that if you want to understand and experience the true essence of life, you have to let go of the appearance of things. So it's more in terms of dropping this over-identification with the ego, with the body, but also understanding that the objects that you're experiencing in the universe are your own reflection. When you understand that, then you ask, then what is left? Right? What is that space or that awareness that persists beyond the no self and the no object? That's nirvana. It is a kind of freedom, a kind of release from samsara.
So it's basically, when we say crossing the ocean of samsara, we have to basically be in samsara and recognize we're in it so we can see what we're not. So it's almost like anything else. You can't know cold if you don't know hot. You can't know up, you can't if you don't know down. So samsara plays a role in helping us understand nirvana. So samsara is filled with all these objects and dualities and movement, and nirvana is the opposite of that. So the opposite of an identity, individuality, it's freedom. And I think it's a peace when people, like they say at the end of the life, people die and they have this incredible sense of peace because they're dropping all the things of the earth and they're coming closer to nirvana. But we don't want to wait till that happens to do that. And you know, I was just this morning, I was reading I go through my Facebook feed sometimes just to see what people are talking about. And this one post caught my eye, someone I didn't really know, but as a friend, you know, on Facebook, you just have these people that are like, I've never saw a post from this person before. And she was talking about how she's at the end of her life. And she was this really long, beautiful post about like, you know, she suffered her whole life with this body. She had a lot of pain and suffering. And she was kind of at peace with like letting go. And what struck me is that she couldn't wait to go away from, like, get to the next thing versus get out of this body. And that in itself is suffering. And it's like almost like there's this other place I'm going to go after I drop this body. And the whole idea of nirvana is, I mean, the real concept is how can we be in both worlds? How can we embrace that contradiction of being in samsara and also nirvana at the same time. And that's kind of really the key is you don't want to wait till the end of your life to say, oh, I get it now. I get all my regrets. And you want to be in, like, use your life to experience those blissful moments and the escape from the ego. And that's kind of, I mean, why would we have samsara if we weren't here to have both worlds at the same time? And I was thinking about how we're seeking for nirvana all the time. And when I find the right partner, I'll have this, beautiful state, or when I get married, or when I, start my business and leave the corporate world finally, when I, make a certain amount of money, all these things, when I get that right weight and I lose all the weight I need and get in shape, all these things that we kind of cling to for this state of happiness that is causing our suffering in life because we miss out, because like we're always looking for the next thing. I remember you said to me once when we first met, you said, I was like, oh, this is going to happen next week. And I think it was when my book was coming out. And you said, where are you going? Where are you going? Like, I'm not in the moment. And so the answer is not to find those things in the world with objects. It's to find it in the moment, because that's the only place we can have it. So we were going to talk about meditation and how that is really the key.
Sure.
Because we try to go out there and find nirvana in things like pistachio ice cream or that next great meal we're going to have, or the vacation we're going on.
Yeah, well, at its simplest, you see somebody meditating, obviously they're looking inward. Mm-hmm. They're not caught up in samsara, in chasing after objects. They're taking a breath and saying, who is the observer? In other words, it's self-inquiry. What is the nature of my mind? And why am I chasing these things? Like, where am I going?
It's interesting what you're just saying is really, I want to clarify that when I was a hypnotherapist, all I did was have people meditate, guided meditation, to visualize what they want to get in their life. And so it was actually building up the ego versus having them do the real work of letting go of the attachment so they can get it. So it's not bad to visualize what you want, but to be so obsessed with, when I get this thing, then I'll be happy, is what's causing you being not happy in the moment. Like it's postponed happiness somehow. So when you talk about meditation and going inward in that examination, it's different than visualization or guided meditation.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of say, well, I meditated today. I visualized, my ideal partner. I visualized my dream home. And that's not meditation. Well, it's a type of meditation, but you're talking about more of a self-inquiry meditation.
Definitely self-inquiry, but also a very disciplined approach to the mind. So you can think of it in kind of stages. You don't just sit and go automatically into a meditation, a true dhyana, or a kind of meditative state. You have to prepare, you have to practice. So non-attachment, obviously, one of the keys, because you could be sitting and looking like you're meditating, but like you say, you're trying to get a car or trying to get a house or a mate or something.
Or fighting with someone in your mind, and that person that irritated you the day before, and you're just like kind of obsessing over it. Like some people try to meditate and they get stuck in like thinking and worry, and then they say, I hate meditating because it's so hard to do, because it makes you really focus on your mind. And what we tend to do is, especially in the Western world, is find ways to distract ourselves from paying attention to our mind.
Yeah. So it's bringing the body, first of all, under the discipline of the mind, so that it's not, your body is not dictating to you what you should do. Right? Get up and get some water, or move around. You're saying to the body, I'm going to direct you. So the postures are very important, to sit in a proper posture for meditation. Then bringing the breath under control. Why the breath? Because breathing is the bridge between the external world and the internal world. If you cannot manage your breath, it's essentially you're still caught up in the external. But managing the breath, meaning directing it from the mind and making it steady, is one of the big practices of meditation, of real meditation. Then withdrawing the senses inward. Again, because if my imagination is attached to things out there, for my mind, it doesn't make that much difference whether I'm perceiving something and lusting after it or desiring it, or if I'm imagining it and desiring it. It's the same principle. I'm still caught up. I'm still suffering. I'm still attached to things. So bringing the senses really into the mind and stilling them is a big part of meditation. And that requires practice and discipline.
Could you explain what you mean by bringing the senses into the mind?
Yes. So the senses operate essentially on their own. If you ever have driven home from work without even, you look back and you think, how did I get here?
I think I missed the exit because I was singing my favorite song.
I must have just blanked out. Your body essentially, its sensory operations continue to operate without mindfulness. And so the senses act on their own. Meaning they're not under the guidance and direction of the mind. What we do in meditation is bring the senses under the realm of the mind. And then the mind directs them to come inward and to be still. Right? Kind of like a turtle drawing in its limbs and its head and its tail into its shell. The mind kind of contains all that. And once the senses are under the guidance and direction of the mind, of the higher mind, then meditation begins. We can then start to concentrate. You can then direct that internal focus anywhere you want. You can focus it on your breathing. You can focus it on your navel, on your seventh chakra, whatever you want. That's the beginning of real meditation. And that requires practice, but once you get there, it's leading you to that liberation.
So it's not just closing your eyes for 5 minutes and then maybe the last 30 seconds you get that bliss state. It's like that 5 minutes and 10 minutes maybe, even I don't know how long in the beginner, it might take 30 minutes to kind of warm up and then getting into that state.
Yeah. So what's going on internally then in the mind, and in some practices described as, if you've ever seen olive oil being poured, when there's a smooth flow, that there's no break in the oil as it's pouring out into another jar or a pan or something, that they describe that continuous flow as meditation. That continuous flow, undisturbed, just steady mind of awareness, pure awareness, that is the meditative state. Now that's not nirvana still, but it's the way to get there.
It's the doorway.
Yes.
It's the bridge to get there.
And it requires that practice of bringing the senses under control, bringing the breath, being able to focus, to direct the focus of the mind so that it's not wandering all over the place.
What are you looking at me for? But it is true that we're so conditioned to be distracted.
Yeah.
And to be jumpy all over the place. I mean, that's the ego. His way is always just like looking for the next thing and to worry about or to get. And it's unsettling. And we wonder why we're unhappy because the ego's never satisfied. There's actually a wonderful story in, I think it was Vivekananda talked about it, Swami. He's not a Buddhist, but from Vedanta, which arose out of Buddhism. And he talks about the hungry ghost and the genie, hungry genie. And there's a similar kind of idea in the Buddhism called the hungry ghost, where they say, imagine someone with a big giant stomach, and then the beast had like a little tiny mouth, and it's never satisfied. And so it's similar to that, where he said that there was a man who said, I went to the guru and he said, I would like a genie. You know, I heard that these genies can give you anything you want, and can I get a genie? And the guru said, you know, I don't think that's a good idea. If I give you a genie, that you have to give that genie something to do every moment. Like, it always has to be busy. And if you don't give it something to do, to make for you and create for you, it's going to eat you up. It's going to eat you up and kill you. So he said, I don't care. I have plenty of things I want. I'm going to keep that genie busy forever. So don't worry, I'm going to take it. And he's like, all right. So he gives the guy the genie, and the genie's like, okay. And he said, I want to be the mayor of the town. Boom, you got the mayor of the town. I want to be the biggest house in town. Boom, you got it. I want the most beautiful wife in the world. Boom, you have the most beautiful wife. And then he kept asking, he wants the whole country. He wanted to be king, and you're king now. And so he was starting to run out of things that he wanted. And the genie's like, give me something to do, give me something to do. And he said, no, I don't know what else I want. And he runs back to the guru, and he says, please take this genie back. I have everything I want. I don't need it anymore. And he said, I told you got to give it something to do, or it's going to eat you. So I'm going to give you a task. He said, find a dog with a curly tail, and take that tail and give it to the genie, and give him a comb and tell him to straighten out the tail. And so he gave it to the genie, and the genie's straightening out the tail, straightens it all out. And then as soon as he lets it go, it curls back again. And then the genie goes back. And so now the genie was busy. So it's kind of like the mind. It always needs something to do. And it's like the curly tail. It's never going to get straightened out. And the ego believes one day that tail is going to be completely straight. I'm going to have no problems in the world. And so meditation can help you watch that process. Watch the process of the mind trying to straighten out that curly tail. And it's such a great visual, because if you think about it, there's in life every day. Just think about something you were worried about today. Just think about that curly tail. Your mind, it's going to get straightened out, but then something else will curl up that tail again. So meditation and nirvana is letting go of that. And what causes that kind of need for things is the ego.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this practice, right, of meditation, of getting to that even flow of awareness, where it's undisturbed awareness, then it leads you to that liberation, which is nirvana. It's a release from the world of samsara, a complete sense of oneness, of non-duality, that is transformative, because it wouldn't do us any good if that state only got us there when we were in deep meditation, because then we would have to just sit in meditation all day and not do anything. The Buddha was very active. Like, he started the sanghas. He would go from city to city to instruct people, to initiate different people into the Dharma, into the work. So he was very active. And when they asked him, who are you? What are you? He said, all I am is awake. So that state of nirvana transforms your mind to where you're seeing things as they truly are. You're having a direct perception of reality, meaning you're not caught up in the appearance of samsara. right? That's the important aspect of Buddhist philosophy, is that he's saying you as an individual that have a mind, right? And everyone has a mind.
I have a mind. I'm an individual.
You're responsible for this mind and for yourself. And you can do this on your own. Or in other words, you can seek out teachers, you can seek out the Dharma and practice, but it's your responsibility to practice this higher knowledge, this deeper philosophy.
And it really, you do need a guide. You can't just try it, because your ego is it loves to convince you that everything's okay. Like the ego's designed to pull you away from enlightenment and higher knowledge. And so you need someone who has that higher knowledge to help guide you. Not just reading books, like, because your ego will pick and choose like a smorgasbord of what it likes.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't like this, or misunderstand, not really understand. I know for me, there were so many things I did not understand, and listening to the gurus talk and teach, it helped me understand it deeper. And so hearing someone who's studied this for years and years and years, not a self-help, it's like really a part of, I think, dedicating yourself to this, to a path.
Yeah, that's so important, because we do see a lot of this kind of picking and choosing from different traditions and kind of giving up when it gets too difficult and saying, well, over here they're just telling me I have to just believe or just...
Or I have to be non-attached. I like this spirituality where I get lots of money and I can visualize, checks and gathering things, and making life, abundant, and not really getting to the root. And there's a lot of attachment that the ego infiltrates a lot of the minds of people. And
that's one of the misconceptions, is that the Buddha is not saying you cannot enjoy the world. All he's saying is you have to be awake in the world so that you understand what these objects are. What is money? What is success? What is having a house and having a family? If you are misunderstanding them, if you're attached, if you are going into this world and saying, when I gather these certain things, I will be happy, then you're setting yourself up for much, much suffering. That's samsara. So the awakened state liberates us from that. It allows us then to act in the world, to be in the world, but be awake.
So nirvana isn't, a lot of people, we've heard this term spiritual bypassing, where like getting rid of the world and like, I want to go somewhere that's better, this other place. And so nirvana or meditation, trying to seek that state, isn't about rejecting the world, not addressing your emotions, not also addressing the things that aren't so spiritual about yourself, like that aren't the perfect human being, the anger and the jealousy, and being, kind of integrating that into your life, and understanding that that's not really who you are. That all is a part of that. And when I first started meditating, I think before I met you, I had these beautiful escapes of meditation that took me away, and I didn't realize I was really bypassing, trying to like leapfrog my way to nirvana, going on the rocket, getting that first class ticket. If I just, visualized enough and got all the things I wanted in the world, and ignored my problems or ignored the suffering, just cover it up and make it pretty. That is really what we're not talking about. We want to wrestle and be present in our mind and have that discipline when we're uncomfortable, to be with that discomfort, not wanting to escape from it. But to know, like I love what you say, is we're truly trying to understand its nature of the mind and the way it thinks, and the ego's structure and its MO, than actually believing and buying into it.
Yes.
Like noticing its tail, like trying to straighten out the tail all the time. constant running.
Yeah, so someone is asking, how would you introduce a meditation practice to someone who is new to this? First of all, you have to explain that meditation was developed in a very different context than the materialistic philosophy that modern societies operate under. If you approach it from the materialistic perspective, then meditation just becomes stress management.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Something about mental health, something about relaxation, stress.
It does help with that.
Of course, that's good stuff.
It's a good start.
But that's not its aim. You can relax better. You can relax by doing an activity, exercising, going for a walk. So you don't need to exert so much energy in meditation if all you're after is stress management.
Well, I think what they think of meditation is listen to like calming waters and relax and that kind of at the end of yoga.
Visualization.
Yeah, that Tadasana after yoga, and you're just laying there and you're like, oh, that's really beautiful. Like you're just letting go. But meditation is actually very active. It's not this passive, relaxation. We're sitting up. We're more alert.
Yeah. So the paradigm is like this. If you think about the Western paradigm that we live in, it essentially says the only reality is the physical reality, what we can measure, what we can observe and touch and see. And of course, it's a very powerful system. That's why most people are so attached to it and they can't give it up. They say, but it's given us so much comfort and convenience. This method, it must be true. It must be real. Of course, it's true. It's real because we're assuming that it's real and true. So the way consciousness works, it's like water. We're pouring it into the vessel of materialism, and it becomes that reality for us. But meditation was developed in a very different worldview, in a paradigm, a worldview where awareness, consciousness was the essential element of the universe.
Now, this is a beginner who never meditated before, so how?
You have to explain this because otherwise it only becomes
Stress relief.
stress management of the body, of the mind-body. So even if they don't understand it, you planting the seed and explaining that this different perspective is what is important as the ground for meditation, then you're on the right track. Then you can instruct them on the practice of sitting, of observing the breath, of moving inward and asking those questions of what is the nature of my mind? Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a real self in me? And if there is, where is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a thought? Is it an emotion? Is it the body? Is it the identity, the persona, as Jung would say?
I find the breath part is probably the easiest for especially beginners, is to just watch your breath. Count to 10 and watch your breath, then to count down again and watch your breath. Just kind of counting the in and out. 1, 2, and you're just kind of giving the mind something to do, and then you kind of get to a place, maybe a couple of times, and then you just kind of get in. There's a shift that happens where you start to really it's like changes in your body, where you slow down and then you drop in the question, who am I? Is there someone real inside of me that where can I find it within me? What is the nature of my mind? And it's unstructured when you get to that state of just being open to what arises, and you're really not looking to analyze. It's more like you just ask the question and you drop it. You're not chasing the answer. I think that's really important. Don't chase the answer when you're in the meditative state. You want to just allow it. Just be in this allowing state. And you might not hear, they may meditate for 30 days and do who am I, and nothing comes up. But on that 31st day, something's going to emerge. So it's you're kind of inviting in the higher nature, your higher nature, to come meet you where you're at.
Yeah. Buddha emphasized three things. You need a guide, like you were saying, somebody to instruct you, to keep you on track. You need the Dharma. Now, you don't necessarily have to do the Buddhism teachings, but you need a deeper context of what is this activity that I'm doing called meditation. If you don't have that context, then again it just becomes another thing to do. And people say, I don't have time, it's just another activity that I have to do in the morning. That's not really what meditation is about, right? When you see it in the right context, in the Dharma, it is a sacred activity. It is you doing the most important thing you can do, essentially, looking inward and reaffirming to yourself the true nature of existence. And then you need the Sangha. Now, the Sangha is simply a group of people. It can be just a group of people that are like-minded and are actively doing the Dharma.
Living the Dharma.
Yes, they're seeking the same nirvana as you are. Because without that, we know from neuroscience, our brains tend to calibrate to the group of people that we hang out with. So if we're hanging out with people from the office and they're all into the materialistic paradigm,
and then we try to meditate.
Yeah. It's not going to work. It's not going to take us very far.
I was always the weirdo in the corporate, like they would, but then when someone had a problem, they would always come to me, but they would be like, oh, Debbie, she's into that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of our students tell us, when I'm listening to you or when I'm practicing with you, I get it. But as soon as I go out the door, I forget it. It just seems to vanish, and I'm back to being caught up in the world. That's the principle right there. That if you do not hang out and cultivate and seek out that community, that Sangha, even if it's just another person to have.
One other person, your buddy, your Nirvana buddy. Would you be my Nirvana buddy, Rob?
Then your mind will tend to calibrate to those important people in your environment. And if you examine their mind, if you just ask, what are they up to? Most of them, they're on the materialistic plane.
I think one great thing, because we're on different mediums like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Notice how you feel when you're scrolling through your feed and you're reacting to different political posts or people, fearful about something that's happening in their life or celebrating something and you're jealous. And you just watch your mind and how your mind can get so lost in that. I mean, and actually social media is designed to trigger us and to keep us out of that nirvana. So, we want to, use it to connect with people, but also watch your mind as you go into those groups. You wouldn't, like, if you had, go, like now we have to wear masks everywhere. You wouldn't not wear, like, we don't think about, well, how do we protect our mind when we're on the group, in the different medias. And Jung talked about the psychic epidemic. He said what really happens in the world is that there's an epidemic of ideas, of people getting riled up about things and creating that suffering in the world, and happened with countries and with wars, since the beginning of time. And so doing this work with yourself, and then having a Sangha and creating that beautiful space creating an epidemic of peace and nirvana would be a way to shift the world, like we talked about in the last episode. So this thing isn't just about your personal life and making your life better, which it will, but it's also about by you being an active part of seeking the truth, you're basically creating a ripple effect too. And with other people, neurologically, we're resonating with those people, and we're making shifts, and those people are maybe putting a little inspiration and a seed of inspiration in people that aren't awake yet and opening up.
Absolutely.
So this is very important. We need a little nirvana in the world right now. So what would you say, we can't describe nirvana, but what would you say the benefit of someone having those type of states or entering those states? If we can't describe what it is, how it can help, like why go there?
Right. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin has been doing this research on Buddhist monks who have been meditating for 40, 50 years. He actually found meditation changes the brain structure. It rewires your brain, meaning it shifts your whole perception of yourself, the world, the way you respond to things, everything. Now think of what's going on here. The mind, through its understanding of deeper principles, spiritual principles, now is directing its mind-body, the appearance of our individuality, to reconstruct it, to redesign it, to create it in a higher way, in a more spiritual way. And it's literally changing the structure of the cells and the neuron connections in a very direct way through meditation. So we can think of meditation as the mechanism, the molding of yourself from the higher self, from your deeper mind, to say, the Buddha mind, as some would say.
So what, in a tangible way, what would be the benefit?
In a tangible way.
Besides the physical change.
Well,
like how would someone live their life differently in the world?
let's say the only way we experience the world is through our mind. There is no other way.
Yeah.
It appears to us as if there is this external reality that is independent of our mind, but it's an illusion. That's part of the samsara. That it creates an illusion of things being out there independent of our experience. But we are the observer. We are the observer in the equation of universe observer. We are the
active participant.
Yes. In other words, that universe you are describing does not exist without you observing it and describing it.
So let me put it this way then. When you practice this work, understand the concepts of nirvana, have an experience of the no self, or this wonderful place, you don't get caught up, very simply, you don't get caught up in the negative and positive of the world. You start to enjoy the highs more in life, the things that are, when they go well, in that moment, it's like rich and beautiful, but you don't get too deep into despair when things aren't working, because you know that you are seeing yourself in difficult people, difficult situations. It becomes more, I hate to say a video game, but it becomes more of this playful, creative activity that we're doing in life versus this, I gotta white knuckle it and make everything happen because I have to leave a legacy behind, and I don't want people to think bad of me, and I gotta prove something to the world or myself. It becomes more free flowing, and basically it's being in the world but not of the world, and also having like one foot in the world and one foot in nirvana. And it's a beautiful place to be. And we can have glimpses of it in the beginning where, ooh, it's like, ooh, today was really blissful. I didn't get caught up in that thing, that situation. Maybe the next week it's a little troublesome. You keep meditating and you'll notice that those times become more consistent and you're less reactive to life and more creative in your life. And that's where you're not afraid to take risks. You're not afraid of doing things that you never thought you can do. You become more in love with life. Unlike the woman that was, suffering from her body, like her whole life was suffering because of her physical body. If she would have known that she had the key to create, change that suffering, it would have been different. And it's like sad that you have to, the last moment, that's where you get it. And we want to be able to have that kind of release, that last moment release. We want to have it all throughout our life. Yeah. Versus just saving the dessert for the end and then it's done. You want to have the dessert all through your life.
Yeah, it is kind of a peacefulness, a seeing, because you're seeing the deeper reality of things, the true reality. You're not as disturbed or as agitated. Your mind is not agitated by the ever-changing flow of things. And we have to be careful here. It doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean we don't care about what's going on in the world.
And we don't feel any suffering. I mean, we will still feel it, but we understand its nature.
Yeah.
So it's not you're living on a cloud, but you're kind of like, ooh, this feels uncomfortable. But its nature. You understand what's happening versus trying to fix it out there. You're saying, oh, I know the sources within my mind. And you feel more empowered to investigate what that is. It's really a chance for you to go to higher levels of states of consciousness by facing difficulties versus avoiding them and only surrounding yourself with, non-toxic people and pushing away people from your past and blaming them for your suffering in life. And you're seeing that, ooh, all this suffering is really helping me understand myself. And you're using it versus trying to compartmentalize your life.
Yeah, that's a good way to see it. That the very things that most people are trying to run away from, through this Dharma, through this deeper understanding, through this meditation, we're able to approach those things and learn the lessons of what is the nature of the mind, what is the nature of reality. And so the very things that most people would consider things to move away from, things to ignore, things to solve or want to get rid of or fix, in this philosophy, we're moving towards those things. We're examining them. We're using them as the greatest lessons of the true nature of the mind and existence, which is ultimately consciousness. In Western science right now, there's this big question of what is consciousness, and they call it the hard problem because they're trying to figure out where it is in the brain, essentially, and they're not going to find it there. It's essentially the indescribable nirvana or the Tao, the pure awareness that cannot be named. It cannot be contained because it's not an object.
There's after going through individuation and continuing the process of individuation, as Jung would say, I noticed there's this not undefined part of my life, of myself, that is me. It's like Debbie, and then there's this other undefined part, which is really wonderful. So it's that nirvana of myself. So people dealing with chronic pain, won't it make sense for them to look forward to physical death so they can finally be free? Yes, that would be the case, but if they understood that they can use their mind because the mind could direct the body, there could be a way for them to transcend that chronic pain in the physical body. Not everyone has the commitment and the consistency and a teacher to help them, but there definitely is. We've noticed that people just going through individuation and doing shadow work has dropped a lot of symptoms in their physical body, because it's like all these things they have an emotional and psychological aspect to them as well.
Yeah, one of the reasons I emphasize the paradigm a lot is because that underlying structure of how we think the universe works sets everything up that follows from there. Because if you think, well, what's possible? If I live in a material universe, only certain things are possible. In other words, only certain mechanisms are operating in that physical universe. Whereas if I live in a conscious universe, it's infinite, basically. It allows for many, many possibilities, and perhaps an infinite amount of possibilities. So it's an important concept. It is difficult to grasp, but think in terms of what is the worldview, the universal view of things.
If it's materialistic.
Yeah, if it's materialistic, then your pain and suffering has to be addressed through drugs, through surgery, through some kind of
heating pads and
some kind of physical mechanism that's going to impact the body.
Even like energy work, people thinking like, I'm just going to move the energy in my body. That's a very materialistic way of looking at it.
That's right. But if you're operating from the consciousness universe, then all things are possible. That's where let's say it accounts for people having these incredible instantaneous remissions from deadly diseases and those kind of situations.
Well, my father was dealing with he was going through chemo the first round, and he almost died from the first round. He was 70, and they said, usually at that age it's really hard to see them go into remission. And so I just taught him how to work with his mind. I told him, like, he was Catholic, so I had him like imagine Jesus there and just kind of working with it. And they told him he had a 20% chance of surviving, and I said, well, that's 20%, that's better than zero. So we working with the mind and helping him talk to the chemo going in and saying, only go to the bad cells, keep my body healthy, and visualizing himself, healing. He went through the second round without any kind of what do they call that? Side effects. Where the first time he was basically almost debilitated, he said it was a miracle. And so what's the difference is that his mind, I showed him how to work with his mind. And so that's really powerful. I've worked with women to go through childbirth. Some women have had horrible childbirth, and then other women barely felt any pain. And it's because they learned to work with their mind. And so it's hard with chronic pain because you're so used to feeling pain that it's hard to get out of it. But it's not impossible, and to be open to that possibility that you're more than just this physical body, that the body can't dictate to you who you are. And I think we fall into that when we're sick. We think we're helpless to this body, and shifting that paradigm of this body is consciousness and I am consciousness, which means I can direct it. So yeah, it's a tough one. So next week we will delve into the brain. We're getting out of nirvana and going back into the body, and we're going to talk about neuroscience. We're going to talk about the brain on God, the brain on love and relationships, the brain on the body, the mind-body, and the brain on success. So how that all works, what's happening neurologically, neuropsychologically as we go through life. So kind of getting back in the body again.
Back to the Western paradigm.
So we'll see you next week. Hope you're having a great Labor Day weekend. And
yeah, I just wanted to say that going through this series, I hope you are seeing that all these traditions that come from different parts of the world, different cultures, they all are saying the same thing essentially. That it's the mind and it's the inner work that counts. They have different languages. They emphasize different techniques, but ultimately, because the truth is always the truth, it's always one. Everyone reaches that same conclusion that we are living in a world of appearance, and that the appearances are important, but that they're not the absolute reality. The absolute reality resides within us. And that message for all students of the mind, like ourselves, is so important. And we, our intention is simply to reiterate that, to translate that into our everyday world that we live in now, so that people can use it and can absorb it and learn from it, right? That we come from very, very wise traditions that are still very much alive today. And that we should not give up this spiritual seeking just because we have technology and comfort and accessibility to wealth or comfort. That it is the essence of our human life to seek out this truth and to practice it.
It's important for humanity. I mean, right now we're dealing with climate change and all these struggles with just challenges we have as human beings, a lot of division, and we need to come together. We need to understand what we're really experiencing before we destroy each other, and destroy the planet. And the ego has a lovely way of destroying things and causing suffering. So we can do our part and create that ripple effect for the world.
Absolutely.
So anyway, take care, everyone. Pack your bags. Go to Nirvana this weekend if you can, and we'll see you next week for our next segment and series on neuroscience.
Thanks for watching.
Take care.